Talking Buckeyes here every week at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Even when there's nothing to talk about, we will talk Buckeyes, and we will hammer on through for the next hour with these three. Basketball's probably on their mind, but we'll make them shift focus. From the top, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove on Rivals, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and of course, Steve Hellwagon, senior Big Ten writer, 247 Sports. Bucknuts. Boys, how we doing today?
Pretty good.
Kevin, you're not allowed to answer. We want to keep this a happy show. No, Kevin's ailing a little bit, playing hurt. We appreciate it. Kevin, if you have to duck out at some point, we understand.
I'll do what I can. I've got my meds here, so we'll go.
Heavily medicated.
All right, Steve, we're going to put you on the spot number one before we remind everyone that they leave their comments, questions, and topics there in the live chat. Also, keep in mind that these guys donate even more so than the hour here throughout the week, just communicating, scheduling. The insight, the information is invaluable. This show only exists because of these three. So keep that in mind. Consider the Super Chat contribution as well as a possible sponsor. So I am pursuing that, but if you have a connection to one potentially, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Steve, Ohio State fans have been down on the secondary for the past year or so, but that's typically a strong point. Now let's get to the linebackers. We talked secondary last week, so if anybody wants to see the spring preview of the secondary, check out last week's show. And Steve, we'll go to the linebacker position. In regards to a bit of a sore spot for the Buckeyes, although I think they've played better the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of an open book or a wide open competition this spring. The top four contributors at linebacker are all gone when you talk about Tuff Borland in the middle, and then Pete Werner and who am I missing? Baron Browning, and then Justin Hilliard outside. Those four guys were all seniors, and they're gone. So you're kind of turning to the next group, which was a year behind those guys, essentially. Taraja Mitchell, Kevon Pope, Dallas Gant in particular. He's gotten to play a little bit. Those three guys are probably next in line, although Craig Young also got to play quite a bit at outside linebacker last season. It's up in the air whether or not those guys will take full advantage of the free year that they had in 2020, because if they do, they would each have 2 years of eligibility left. And if you figure they're the presumptive starters, which I don't think anybody can presume that, because I think they're going to go through spring football, and there's a whole host of younger guys and talented guys coming through the pipeline now. They're trying to rebuild the depth there a little bit. I mean, when you lose four seniors out of your position group, that is a huge vacuum to kind of refill. So in the 2021, 2022 classes, they're trying to add some guys there. And we'll see if, they get the numbers back up where they need to be, to where the competition for playing time is what it needs to be, and they push each other and everything else. But I don't think anybody's going to play by default, or just because, well, you've been waiting, it's your turn. It doesn't work like that at a place like Ohio State. You have to produce or you can't play. So my feeling is Gant is probably the guy I would have the most good feeling about, just because he's probably played the most of those guys that are kind of on the rise up from juniors last year to juniors again this year. But again, there's a lot of young guys in the pipeline who are going to be pushing for playing time. And again, Al Washington, back as the linebackers coach, he flirted with going to Tennessee to become the defensive coordinator, decided to stay. And I think that continuity will bode well for Ohio State as they try and refill that linebacker group, restocking the numbers and finding a workable two deep, two guys at each of the three spots that are going to put them back where they need to be, or keep them where they need to be at the top of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things to look at here. I was just looking at the snap counts, and Taraja Mitchell played a little bit more than Dallas Gant last year, but Gant playing middle linebacker when They could have gone to him when Tough Borland was out with COVID. They went to Justin Hilliard instead, and moved Baron Browning to the middle. So, Mitchell has been the backup for 2 years. Gann has been the backup for 2 years. Pope has a backup for a couple of years as well. And you assume they're going to just rise up. But then you've got other guys waiting in the wings. I know Craig Young played more than Pope did last year for like the first half, and then Pope played more than Young did the second half, playing the same Sam position. And so I think you assume like those three guys will maybe start out the spring at top of the depth chart, but then can they hold off the guys below them? And then I also wonder, is this going to be a standard 4-3 defense, or do they move more towards a hybrid linebacker as the base? Is it more of a 4-2-5 where you've got even Craig Young might be more of a hybrid than just your standard Sam linebacker, being a guy who is big but athletic, or it won't be Court Williams. We know that because he's still out. But will they eventually move towards 4-2-5? That's what I'm wondering. But with the number of linebackers they've got, I don't think that you can say that these are your starters. But I think the Mitchell at the Will, Gant at the Mike, and then I assume Pope at the Sam will be the first three guys you see. And then where it goes from there after the first practice, who knows?
Yeah, I think everything's been pretty much covered by Tony and Steve there. I think that Court Williams, once healthy, kind of becomes the wild card in this whole equation. Just, I know that there's a lot of excitement around him, but things got cut off pretty quick with his injury. A lot of names that are like young right now that we haven't talked about a lot. Tommy Eichenberg saw a couple of snaps in late game action. Then, of course, you have Cody Simon and Mitchell Melton. What do they mean there? But yeah, that class of Gant, Mitchell, and Pope seem to be the presumptive favorites to at least start the process at the top. But nothing, as Steve said, nothing is given. Everything's earned. So, being the day one starter in terms of practice doesn't mean anything with a lot of time to go. Certainly with the time that Craig Young has spent on the field in terms of last season, he seems to be somebody who could be a little bit of a disruptor there of getting in. But I'm really excited to see, in particular, Court Williams once he is healthy and able to contribute, because he was one of those recruits that came in with a lot of fanfare, even if he was not talked about as much as some of the other guys in the class.
Yeah, and Ryan Day said he looked like a future captain when we talked to him signing day a year ago. And when your coach is already saying that about you when you've been on campus for I don't even know if he was on campus at that point. That may have been the December signing day where he said that about Court Williams. So that always makes you just keep that name in the back of your mind. I do wonder, is there a fourth linebacker that can be what Justin Hilliard was? Is it Craig Young, where you just there's somebody you can rely on? Is it Kayvon Pope, who I think can play inside or outside, or even like a guy like Reed Carrico, who I don't think it would be, but he's a guy that can play anywhere, I think, in this defense. And just finding a fourth guy that if somebody goes down, then there's talent around that you can move people around. And we know the Will and the Mike are pretty interchangeable in this defense, and that gives you more versatility. Dallas Gant started his career as an outside linebacker at Ohio State, I believe, before moving inside. And he was another guy that they loved right away with his intelligence and understanding of the defense. I think those three guys were really, really hyped before they got to Ohio State and then after they arrived. And now it's time to see it. And we'll get the first words on it this spring. But I guess it's now or never for those guys, considering they are seniors or could be redshirt juniors, however you want to put it. But yeah, and as Steve said, it's not just going to be by default. There's enough talent to push them, I think.
And it's important to have that fourth guy, but let's not see it in terms of a 4-4, as
No.
a lot of people were not very enthusiastic about seeing the 4-4 out there at times where maybe running a nickel would have made more sense.
Got the defensive questions pouring in, both on the live chat and also a number of comments that were made to last week's show. Vinay, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Appreciate that. We'll start with Steve on this one. Curious on the panel's impressions of Cade Stover and the strides he's taken so far in winter workouts. Do you all anticipate major production from him?
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't want to say it's by default because again, the theme of this week's show is nothing is by default. But man, you lose Houseman and Farrell off that team from last year, and you only have Ruckert, who's really played, coming back. I think that in some regards, they are looking at Stover as being the number 2 tight end. They got some younger guys that are on that list as well. But to me, Stover made the move from defense to offense with this in mind that he would be next in line this year. He was a great offensive player as well as a great defensive player in his high school days. Lexington High School up in the Mansfield area was a Mr. Football because he could do both. And I am looking forward to seeing what he could do. We got to watch one day of practice, I think last spring, before the pandemic, and he was all over the place catching passes. And for whatever reason, never really got to see much action during the season. And of course, they had the 3 guys with seniority over him that Kevin Wilson went with. And I'm sure he was whispering in Cade Stover's ear the entire time, "You're still my guy, Cade. You're still my guy." Because Cade Stover stood very stoically over on the sideline all season long and played a little bit on special teams, maybe. I don't know. We didn't really see much at all. So now they're turning to him and saying, "Okay, this is your 3rd year. This is what we're looking for here, and we need you." And we'll see if he answers the call. They got a couple of young guys, coming in. Joe Royer, I know, obviously is going to be in that mix as well. And so they've got a tight end, I think, is it Hart coming in from Colorado? I think is that his name as well. So they've got, and they've got a couple walk-ons that they're going to be using as well. Mitch Rossi, I think, is he still in that group, perhaps as a walk-on. So they're gonna have some guys there, some bodies, but I think this is the year for Stover to have his breakout and for the public to reacquaint itself with why he was such a big deal coming out of high school 2 years ago.
I'll jump in. I mean, they ran a lot of 12, 1 back, 2 tights last year. So, I mean, the opportunity is going to be there for Stover this year if they continue running 12. They're not going to need to as much in terms of protection just because of the line that they have, and I think with how strong the line is. But, if the goal is to get the best 11 out there, and if Stover can just continue making progress of the way that all accounts were that he was. I mean, he wasn't going to get out there and see a lot of playing time with when you had Farrell and obviously Ruckert out there. But I think that I think he could have a pretty big impact this year. I've heard a lot of good things. I mean, it's just all a matter of putting it together. You get recruited on one side of the ball. I mean, you can be a standout 2-way player in high school, but we know that doesn't necessarily mean much in terms of translation. But I'm sure that Larry Johnson just didn't up and say, "Hey, just take him. It was kind of a situation of where it's like, I think his better need is there. Let's move Cormonte Hamilton to defense. We'll do this. Maybe a player to be named later. I don't know if anything else was involved in that switch in terms of roster management or whatnot. But I've talked to a lot of people up from where he's from, that part of the state, up around the Mansfield area, and they're all very, very excited about what he can be based on what they saw in high school. So I think fans who haven't had an opportunity to really study him, I think they should be able to take a page out of that and be excited about what he could become.
And the physicality is there as well, coming over from the defensive side of the ball. I don't foresee that being an issue. Technique and blocking maybe. But yeah, Steve was right. I still remember that the one spring we saw, he's catching passes all over the place. Another standout from that one day was Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he showed some of that last season. But something that Ryan Day said last month and that we've seen bear out the last couple of years is that second tight end is it's not just in competition with the other tight ends to move up that depth chart. That position is also in competition with the receiver position, the number 3 receiver, to see who gets to be on the field more. And when Ohio State only had KJ Hill in the slot, that led to more time for Jeremy Ruckert in 2019. And when it was Garrett Wilson and just a freshman, Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, that led to more 12 personnel. And so this year now it's if Jackson Smith and Jigba is still in the slot, it's him against Cade Stover or Joe Royer, and you like your chances with that the third receiver more often. So it just that battle of the inside receivers versus the second tight end for the Ohio State tight ends is going to be an issue, and I like the Ohio State receivers on in that respect. So I think Jeremy Rucker gets a ton of time. Cade Stover will get some time. I don't know if they're going to be able to run as much 12 personnel, not just because of Cade Stover, but because of the number of receivers that they have to get on the field.
We snuck in the super chat on the tight ends. Now we'll get back to the defense. A number of questions in the live chat on that side of the football, as well as an interesting one here to the comments on last week's show. David, 1979. Buckeye D is a mess. This more of a schematic comment / question in need of a new philosophy. They still play caveman ball, 4 D linemen, 3 linebackers. Their secondary sucks because they have 4 guys back. They're trying to cover everybody. Bama, Clemson, even Michigan have evolved.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
True in Michigan.
We're really going to try and put Ohio State, who was in the national championship game, and that team up north in the same situation. I get it. You don't like Kerry Combs. Take a breath. Relax. This is ridiculous. Give them a break. It was a secondary that was depleted. The loss of Cameron Brown certainly didn't help. There were a lot of moving parts in there for an imperfect storm for a team that played for a national championship. Jesus Christ. Come on, man.
In a COVID year. I mean, where they didn't have spring football to get the coaches, the new coordinator acclimated with the players. I mean, it was trial and error, I think, for them throughout the first, throughout much of the season. Nobody likes excuses. Nobody, don't tell me about the pain, show me the baby. That's what everybody's all about. But, they're going to be what they're going to be. And you're going to 9 times out of 10 play the level of your talent level. And, they were the better team on the field in the games that they won, and they weren't in the one that they lost. And that was just the fact of the matter. And, typically that's how it's been. I mean, they haven't lost a game that they should have won. I mean, the Clemson game the year before, potentially, that game could have gone either way. It's been a long time since they've lost the game to a team that they should have beaten, clearly should have beaten. So, I think in some regards, just trust the process and just believe in the fact that they've recruited extremely well. And I think that if you stay with that thought, that will get you through these tough times, because you just have to believe in the talent. I mean, did we was there panic in the streets when, after the national championship season in 2015 that they came back and replaced a lot of those guys, with Hooker and Lattimore and Ward, and they were able to keep right on rolling. I mean, I think that's what you have to kind of have faith in this process and this system that, like Alabama, like Clemson, they maybe Georgia to a degree, they have put themselves on a pedestal where very few teams can match up with what they put on the field, and certainly nobody in the Big Ten can. So you're going to be like Oklahoma in the running for the playoff 8 years out of 10, and if all things are considered equal. And I know you'd like to win one every now and then, and maybe they're getting, I'm trying to put my watch up here where people can see it. Maybe they're getting time. Maybe it's getting time that they're due to win one again, but just be patient. And I know patience is in such short supply these days, but it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. They're going to have a great spring. They're going to have a normal summer for the most part. And then they're going to get to work in preseason camp, and they're going to put a quality product on the field. I don't have any doubt about that.
We repeat this about the secondary, all of the different things that happened and why. And I think whenever somebody wants to ask, like, why didn't this or how come this, just remember there was a pandemic going on. And so that has stunted everything. That has stunted a lot of development. But then also with the secondary, you're losing decommitment from Jordan Battle. You lose Clark Phillips down the stretch, and you lose players to criminal activity and guys early to the NFL. And when all of that happens, and you also lose a tremendous coach in Jeff Hafley, when all of that happens in the span of months, it's going to take its toll. And I still think Jeff Hafley's not going to turn that defense, that secondary, into a national title secondary last year either, because they were who they were, and you couldn't develop the young players because they didn't get enough time in games because, hey, there are only 8 games instead of 14 or 15. That takes its toll as well. And, they still made it to the national title, and they still put a hurting on Clemson. And no, they shouldn't give up as many passing yards as they do, but passing yards allowed is almost as worthless a statistic as there is in college football. It's not as bad as time of possession, but passing yards against your defense almost means nothing when you are leading by 30 points in the second half and all the opponent is doing is trying to throw the ball to catch up. And you as a defense are allowing it because, yes, here's your 10 yards. Now I will tackle you and the clock will move. Good job. Good effort.
Kevin would have loved the rest of the comment, but he cut right in. He caught the vibe to that one. So that somebody actually later commented in that same comment section to that video talking about the secondary from last week that this is the most toxic string of comments that I've ever seen on one of Mark's videos. So there was more like it. So we'll just take that as the one slice that you guys addressed, and the rest of it can go. All right. The Rod Farva addressing this to Steve. I believe this is to everyone. Steve had been the one in the live chat asking for the questions, so we can go around. We'll start with Kevin here on why hasn't Zach Harrison emerged as the player everyone thought he would be?
Well, I mean, it doesn't always – everybody's not on the same timeline. It doesn't always happen. The situation is they roll a lot of guys in and out. You're getting 27, 30 snaps in a game. He goes from being a complimentary piece to, I think all the expectations of the world are put on him, and there's not a Bosa or Chase Young out there to draw attention. And the problem with having a generational player after generational player after generational player is you forget they're generational players. I mean, Ohio State just has been very fortunate to have the guys there, and it's very lofty expectations to expect Zach Harrison or moving ahead to Jack Sawyer, who's coming in just to step right in there and have those types of production points. And I think the issue, too, is that a lot of times we view a rush end, a defensive end, with what his sack number is, and maybe TFL if you're lucky. But, we don't see, disruptions and things along those lines. So, if you don't have 9.5 sacks in a 8-game season or whatever, I mean, you're just obviously underachieving to the nth degree and not getting it done. Now, with that being said, have we really seen Zach Harrison scratch the surface? In terms of his physical abilities of what he has, probably not. But everybody just kind of operates on their own timeline. And, I think that holding people to the standard of the Bosas and to Chase Young is, those are damn near impossible, standards to hold somebody to.
Anything else on Zach Harrison?
Yeah, I'll throw in there that I like where Kevin's coming from on that. My impression of what happened was that some people came through the pandemic in one way, and some people came through it in another. And by that I mean, when they were able to get back to work, certain people had gotten better, certain people had stayed the same, certain people had not improved themselves. And I'm not here to say that he hadn't improved himself. Maybe his level of improvement was not commensurate with the level of improvement of some other players. And I just think that it was a difficult 5 to 7 months, whatever that was. They were 3 months completely apart from the coaching staff. And that 3 months, which they're going through it right now, similar time, is critical in a player's development. And it's entirely possible that he came back and just wasn't in. It's difficult for me to say this. I'm trying not to say anything negative about him other than to say different players came through that in different ways. And when the season started, it was clear he was not at the top of Larry Johnson's list at defensive end. And that was based on what he'd done in preseason camp, because he wasn't starting games and he wasn't even among the top 2 or 3 guys playing in terms of the number of plays. And everyone's scratching their head, well, what's going on? Well, as the season went on, he had some great moments. And he did some really, really good things. Indiana in particular, I think he made a couple of good plays. And I remember complaining that they had Indiana backed up and about ready to put the game away, and they let him off the hook. It was like 3rd and 15 on their own 10-yard line, and they gave up a 3rd down conversion, and they didn't get any heat on the quarterback. And here was Zach Harrison, who'd played, I thought, one of his best games, wasn't in there on that play. And I'm like, you're trying to end the game right here with a stop. And, one of the most critical plays of the game, the guy who's played the best wasn't in there. And so, they get caught up in rotation and they get caught up down the sideline of, we got to get him in there. And, oh, no, he needs a blow, whatever. And, just got all these voices and different things going on. And what we see from the outside is probably different from what they are dealing with on the inside in terms of who's healthy, who's practiced the best, who fits the scheme the best, who does this, that, whatever. And so I think it's hard sometimes, I think, for people outside the program to understand why certain guys are doing this and certain guys aren't doing that. So that to me was what it was, just kind of, I don't know, there was dark cloud was over his head all season, but it was a year that, a learning year, I think, for him to find out exactly what Larry Johnson is looking for and to give him that on a consistent basis. I think that's what Zach Harrison learned during 2020 was that, again, you've got to bring it and you've got to be consistent with your effort. And I don't think anybody really in that group stood out. I mean, Tyreek Smith by the end of the year had become a bit of a difference maker, but certainly wasn't, for a good part of the season. It was just kind of a tough year. They had guys banged up, guys that were in and out because of injury and also because of COVID. And so I think guys were actually playing too many plays in some instances in some games because guys were out. And there's a diminishing return to that as well. I mean, Joey Bosa couldn't play 80 plays a game. I mean, to give you his best, he needed to be around 40, 50 plays a game, I mean, he played about 2/3 of the time, which was good. But again, there's a diminishing return. So I chalk it all up, and I look for Zach Harrison to come back and be a real difference maker this season. I think he and Tyreek Smith could just be dynamite to 2 end positions. But the key to that is making sure that they go 3 deep, really, at each of those positions. That way they can have a true role of guys and always have a fresh body and always impact the game and always get in the quarterback's face and always get off the field on 3rd down. Now, always, relative term, 70% of the time get off the field on 3rd down or whatever's a good percentage. But you follow what I'm saying. I think this is going to be a good year for Zach.
I think we remember he was a true sophomore. He led Ohio State's defensive line in tackles for loss and was second among the defensive ends in sacks as a true sophomore. And that is disappointing because of the hype that he arrived with, not because of anything else. I don't think when a true sophomore does that, that's pretty impressive. It is interesting to me how, and Kevin said it, you can't just measure it by sacks and tackles for loss, because you see like the hype for Tyreek Smith at the end of the year with PFF going crazy about him and his hurry rate and his pressure rate and all of these things were so high. And yet he had 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack all season last year. And I would expect, as Steve said, those 2 guys to really play their best and be impactful players. But I think it is interesting that Tyreek Smith is now heading into his senior year. You don't hear the same amount of disappointment surrounding him because he was only the number 33 player in the class instead of like the number 7 player that Zach Harrison was. And again, I'll just continue to go back to pandemic also. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These guys can't play every other day like another sport, but still they need that routine and that repetition of playing weekly. And they only played a couple times back-to-back games, 2 or 3 times. So difficult to evaluate 2020, but when it all came out, I think the best teams were playing in the championship and the best team won. And that would be difficult to argue. All right, Todd B, we'll start with Steve on this one, asking whether Ryan Day is putting as much emphasis on the game as Urban Meyer did.
Well, I think it'd be hard to put as much emphasis on it as Urban Meyer did, but I definitely believe Ryan Day is accentuating that rivalry, and I have no doubt about that. I mean, we know some of the byplay that happened last year supposedly between he and Coach Harbaugh on a Big Ten coaches call, and just kind of the sniping that may have gone back and forth about that. And I think Ryan Day knows that everything begins and ends with the University of Michigan, and then obviously you build out from there with the other great challenges that you face in a given season. And now Michigan State, Indiana, Michigan, Penn State. I don't know what I'm losing track of the schools I just reeled off, but you're in a pretty good division, the Big Ten East, and there's typically 1 or 2 good teams from the West, one that you might play in the regular season, and maybe another one that you might play in the championship game, or as in the case of 2 years ago, a really good one from the West that you happen to play twice in Wisconsin. But I just think that you have to look at it that from the beginning of time, the Ohio State football program, one of the tenets has been, thou shalt beat the University of Michigan, or thou shalt die trying. I mean, it's kind of time in memoriam, at Ohio State that you don't want to let that down. And I think when you look at everything that's happened, I guess, in the last 20 years, I think they didn't play obviously last year, but 17-2 in the last 19 years or something like that against the University of Michigan. It's just an absurd record. So Ohio State wants to maintain that and just keep it going. That's all that they can do. And I don't have any doubt that Ryan Day is working every bit as hard on that rivalry as Urban Meyer did. It's just Urban wore it and talked it and breathed it. And I mean, it'd be impossible for anybody. I mean, did Urban take it to the level that Woody Hayes did? I mean, you think that's impossible. So I'd say Woody 1, Urban 2, and Day 3, but Tressel's in there too, and so was Earl. So.
You left somebody out there between 1951 and now.
You guys, you get me in trouble. I don't know.
Yeah.
He didn't happen to go 2-10, did he?
And 1.
I just feel like Day's going to push
day,
it.
though.
Day's going to push it as hard as the others, and the proof's going to be when they show up to play that game in Thanksgiving weekend every year. I don't see anything changing as far as that's concerned for a while.
I'm going to show my age and go back to an old Bugs Bunny cartoon to where Bugs Bunny with a handsaw cuts off Florida and lets it float into the sea. I mean, short of Ryan Day going up there and going to Toledo and sawing off Michigan, letting it sink into the lake, I don't know what else he needs to do to show that he takes it as seriously. He's not out there dropping the M word or anything like that. He's certainly not playing kumbaya or going and having, s'mores over a campfire with Jim Harbaugh or anybody there. I mean, he's definitely taking it as seriously. Urban was Urban before he got to Ohio State and already kind of had this media, persona, and certainly was probably a little bit more visible in terms of having, his national championships and whatnot, and, a longer coaching career. So, I think people were more aware of every movement that Urban made. We've had a COVID year to where, I might be able to find the Woody Hayes complex on a map. It's been such a long time since I've been there that, I don't know if I could drive there on autopilot anymore. That's a joke. I can get there. But, we're not seeing every movement that Ryan Day makes the way that we were under the, 3 to 4 to 5 days a week that we were on campus under normal circumstances. But, as Steve had mentioned, whether or not you want to believe that we're going to hang 100 on you, you better hope that there's a mercy rule, blah, 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 blah. I don't have any reason to doubt any of that happened, to be honest. I have zero reason to doubt the validity of that. I heard it before the news came out. I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to corroborate this? And lo and behold, it comes out. I'm like, well, I guess I should have run with it. But, it's real. Ohio State still has its team up north periods. Nobody is dropping that. I mean, when Ryan Day on a Zoom call goes to a female reporter who no longer has a paper at this point, or a radio station, is like, Lori, we don't use that word. It's real. It's real, and I don't think that anybody should lose a moment of sleep over Ohio State napping on Michigan, especially with the fact that Michigan has been about as competitive as roadkill in this series as of late.
However, I will bring up one point.
Oh boy.
Under Urban Meyer, Michigan week throughout the football facility, nonstop on the loop, LL Cool J's, it's time for war. Ryan Day, first year, I believe he stopped that. So now some of that may have been the begging of the players, please don't do this. Please stop this, because by the end, the players hated it as well. But it triggers something in your mind. I do think that if there was any inkling of, Ryan Day, like feeling sorry about Michigan or not caring enough about him, after that Zoom call, forget about it. It was he was all fired up and ready for that. I mean, but then if you look at the scores of the games, since Ryan Day has arrived, and one of those he was, offensive coordinator and one the head coach, I don't think you can fault what he's doing against Michigan. And I know, why would you do anything differently than Urban Meyer did? And then you incorporate that and then add your own things, like, like 4 more touchdowns.
Passing until the last second. I mean, short of going for 3. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, we were all concerned. Will Ohio State be able to recruit post Urban Meyer? Check. Will Ohio State be able to compete with that team up north post Urban Meyer? Check. I think we're okay so far.
So far, so good.
I don't know what other rivalry would have maintained this kind of fervency and tenacity through this kind of winning streak. Maybe Alabama-Auburn, but just to maintain that type of paranoia, I'll use that word. There are better words to use, I'm sure, to a team that you beat down every year. Just it's impressive. I'll say that.
I'll throw in that you can't allow any complacency to kind of fit in here, because I've seen some rivalry rankings. People love to do that type stuff on Twitter and on their websites. And I saw somebody had moved Ohio State, Michigan, down the line to like number 4, number 5 among the national rivalries, where it was always 1 or 2. I mean, the 3 that you really think about are Alabama, Auburn, Army, Navy, and Ohio State, Michigan. I don't think anybody else is really on that same plane, particularly when you've had so many of them that have gotten broken up over the years, like West Virginia and Pittsburgh don't play each other, and Texas A&M don't play each other anymore. So, but I did see one that had Ohio State, Michigan clear down at like number 4. I don't think you'll ever have the Ohio State coaches and players getting complacent about it, which is all that really matters. And again, Michigan has recruited at a decent enough level that they put representative teams on the field, and they win their share of games against other programs. I mean, they're, this year apart, usually a 9 or 10 win program a lot of years. I got in trouble, I think, with Mark, in one of the recent shows for saying that they weren't much better than that, or that they were probably worse than that. But the issue is, until they recruit at the same level as Ohio State, they're not going to win a majority games over Ohio State. It's just not going to happen, just as it would be the truth for Indiana, Michigan State, Penn State, or whoever else. If they don't recruit on Ohio State's level over a 3, 5, 10, 20-year period, they're not going to win a majority of games over Ohio State. So until that happens, objects in motion tend to stay in motion.
And that was the same case with John Cooper, because even though he went 2-10-1, once that recruiting picked up, then comes the 94 win, the 98 win, and the 3 other games that were pretty darn close, and certainly closer than the others. But it is also that 2-10-1, which led to complacency on Michigan's part, like the entire program, fan base, and everything. And I think there's some of that, maybe with like us old schoolers here, like we remember that 2-10-1, and it's always like never forget, and you try not to let the fan base forget, because it wasn't always like this. It won't always be like this, and maybe it continues to be like this as long as everybody is focused. But it's not supposed to be like this. That's why you should enjoy it. That's not why you should be taking it for granted.
I keep trying to figure out why there is such a gap in the 2 games that were most recently played and in the long winning streak, even though there were some close games, obviously, during that stretch. 2013, 2016, of course, come to mind. And I think it's just a combination of things. There is a decided talent gap, and it's widening, it's growing. But in addition to that, if Ohio State was playing a like team from a talent perspective in the Big Ten, somebody else, Penn State is the only team that's been comparable from a talent perspective consistently with Michigan over the Jim Harbaugh era, and Ohio State doesn't beat them like a drum every year. If Ohio State was playing outside of the Rutgers and Marylands and Illinois of the league, they were playing that next tier, and they were playing them every year, they wouldn't beat them like a drum every time. So there's got to be some combination of the talent with the laser focus, and now it's got to be in the heads of Michigan that they're half beaten when they walk on the field.
Well, and Michigan's also had quarterback issues by the time they play Ohio State as well. When you're down to like John O'Corn, like Wilton Speight in 2016 had a really good year all season long. And you saw what that produced that season. Devin Gardner in 2013, also a really good game. Surprisingly, the Jake Rudock 2015, he had a great season, but that game just got out of control by the end. But yeah, they're so, by the end of it, and Shea Patterson was never really that good. And so they've had quarterback issues, I think, has maybe been the thing that has kept them from competing as much, or even maybe winning a couple of games, because really, should Michigan be reliant upon Wilton Speight to be winning games for them? Should he be their best option? I don't think so.
Well, not only do they have quarterback issues, they can't run the ball.
Yeah, it's bad.
I mean, Mike Hart's not walking through that door in terms of running the ball for them. I mean, I'm not going to single amateurs out, and that's not who I want to be or whatever, but. I can't name a Michigan running back here in recent memory that I would say that would really sniff playing time at Ohio State. And then the other thing, especially under Harbaugh, is they've been so slow to adapt. And Ohio State has been able to tailor its offense, because obviously in order to blow somebody out, you need to put points up to get there. Ohio State's been able to do so many things offensively. And, I mean, they've just been able to target weak points with that Michigan defense to the point of it doesn't matter if they have a Chase Winovich or a Rashawn Gary or whoever. Ohio State's already 6 moves ahead of them. So from basically the inventory here, no quarterback, can't run the ball, can't adapt on defense. Their coach eats boogers. I mean, what the hell do they have? I mean, it's just not good.
And in general, the team that runs the ball in that game wins. And I think you can go back. I think that's the case since like 2001. Whoever averages more yards per carry wins, and that's That's only been Michigan a couple of times. And Fitzgerald, Toussaint, no. Devion Smith had an Ohio State offer, but I don't think they're super upset to see him go. And you just look at the talent that Michigan has had at running back, and it's been not great. And no matter how many of their offensive linemen get drafted and how great their offensive line supposedly is, they're still bottom middle of the pack when it comes to running the ball. And that shouldn't be the case. And it should never be the case. You're Michigan. And so, I guess let's just go down the list. Not good enough, too poor there, not enough talent. And also you're getting outcoached. So just a couple of things. If you just tweak a couple of things.
Well, you guys mentioned, at the beginning of this, the quarterback and no running game. I think the defense was largely overrated and has been for years. I mean, the whole year in and year out playing early season clunker like Wisconsin and just get steamrolled and, kind of debunk that whole myth of, I made a real funny comment, that, Joe Milton's gone and Dr. Blitz, Don Brown are gone. The two of them will always have that October Thursday night in Minnesota where Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit just fawned all over them in that 49-28 win over the Golden Gophers, who, as it turned out, were nowhere near as good as they had been the year before. And, that will be their one night that 1 3-hour broadcast those two can share with each other forever on their fondness of their Michigan time. But it just defensively, they've, that poor Metellus, the last game that got played between Ohio State and Michigan, our guy was taking photos and Metellus is in the background on like 5 touchdowns. I mean, like boom, 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 boom. I mean, deep ball, short ball caught and taken 74 yards. He's running right behind the guy. I mean, it was – they don't have it. And now here I go, Mark. Here I go. And you guys you're reeling me in. You're reeling me in again. I'm sorry, Mark. They're still a 9 or 10 win program every year.
You said the overrated of the defense. I still go back to when Jabril Peppers won like the defensive player of the year, and I think Draymond Jones had the same number of tackles in Big Ten play as Jabril Peppers as a redshirt freshman defensive tackle, and Peppers still got all of that hype.
His only interception came in the last game against OSU, wasn't it?
And I tweeted at the Buckeye fans well in advance. Yeah, exactly. It was a tipped pass. I tweeted to Buckeye fans well in advance. Stop making fun of Jabril Peppers for having no interceptions because it's going to lead to an interception against your Buckeyes, and of course it did. But it was harmless, just as he was.
And you talked about Josh Metellus. I go to Brandon Watson before that, and I remember Can't Guard Mike was on the Ohio State sidelines at that point, and he tweeted out that 28, who was Brandon Watson, he ain't got nothing for Ohio State, and they targeted him all game, and they made him have a very long day because it didn't matter where they put him on the field. They found him, and he was rarely in frame. I mean, they just, with Ohio State speed and just with, a semi-modern passing attack, was able to just make that Don Brown defense look a little leaky.
Was that 2018 where I know Olave got him once or twice, certainly on the crossing route. I think there was also, was that the game where KJ Hill pointed at him? Yes, pointed at him while he was motioning, saying, I'm going to, just letting you know, I'm going to come and get a touchdown. And of course, then he catches a touchdown inside the 5. And yeah, that's, while you enjoy the rivalry and you love it, sometimes there's some guys you certainly feel bad for. And usually it's in the Michigan secondary, except for, of course, Jabril Peppers and Charles Woodson.
And just to pile on this Michigan secondary, I brought to the attention of our Michigan podcast guy, Steve Dace, yesterday that was the worst Michigan secondary since, and I had him fill in the blank. He went back to the Rich Rod era. And then I said, and to solve that, they have signed 2 defensive backs, only 2 in the 21 class, and they are rated 43rd and 39th at safety and cornerback, 2 3-stars. So could either one of them turn out to be a tremendous player? Of course they could. 3 stars do that all the time. But most likely They're not. So they have addressed that long list of issues you gave, Tony, basically was addressed by signing and bringing in 6 different coaches, none of which have ever coached the position that they're being hired to coach. Is that usually a formula for success?
Yeah, well, I look at Michigan's roster and who they have out there, and Daxton Hill. I think if you put him in a system where he has some dudes around him, I think he's pretty good. I know Ohio State really liked him a lot. We had the opportunity to see him in Oklahoma when he was still a high schooler before he announced for Michigan. But it's difficult. It's difficult for anybody there because there's just a lot of issues around them. And going back to Rich Rod, Rich Rod he was the king of recruiting 5'11" guys, regardless of position. What worked at WVU was not going to work in Ann Arbor and inside the Big Ten. And, that was kind of the gift that kept on giving for Ohio State, because it took a while to cycle through a lot of guys that probably would not have gotten those Michigan offers, a regime or two prior.
And I remember writing at the time when Rich Rodriguez took over that if he's going to recruit against teams like Purdue, he's going to be fielding a Purdue roster. And that still holds true. The teams that you recruit against, that's the roster that you're going to be building. And if you're not recruiting against Ohio State and Oklahoma and Notre Dame and whatever, then you're going to be playing to the level that you recruit to. And yes, we see it every year. Oh, so many more players from the Super Bowl were 3 stars, then 4 stars, and 5 stars. Well, it's because there's 1,000 3 stars, there's 200 4 stars, and there's 35 stars. Do the math. That's just how that works. But when your team is 80% 3 stars and you're Michigan, that's not going to cut it. And especially with their lack of development. But now, Mark, as you said, they've got some new coaches and fresh eyes in fresh positions. And you know what? I like the thought process of bringing in Baltimore running backs coach to coach your quarterbacks. I think that's brilliant. And how can you possibly go wrong? You got him. You've got Jim Harbaugh. Either J.J. McCarthy or Cade McNamara. Right now, for me, it's a toss-up as to the September Heisman winner.
Well, and you sit there and you talk about beating Purdue in terms of recruiting or whatever. Well, what was their excuse for losing to Appalachian State when it was an FCS team? I mean, they weren't having to go out and recruit against that small school out of Boone, North Carolina. So, and I know that's an outlier or whatever. And
not if they played 10 times, it wouldn't be.
I was going to say, whenever we don't have a topic, we should just talk about Michigan, because I think we can all kind of get on a downhill roll on that one. Something that Michigan's not been able to do for many years.
Mark, is that a Cleveland Indians?
It is.
Shirt, man. Pitchers and catchers already there, and the Cactus League begins on Sunday, I think.
My beloved tribe. Yes. Yeah. We're still waiting for the year.
The Indians payroll, I believe, is $1,200 this year?
Yeah, once the stimulus check
they
comes
get that
in, they'll be able to pay
payment.
for it.
Yeah.
They'll be able to cover that.
They can double it once they get the stimulus check.
I was going to say they were able to use last year's rosin bags, so they were able to save a couple bucks there.
Maybe they can write off that PPP loan.
David Knight, thank you so much for that super sticker. Appreciate that so much. David contacts me on a regular basis and is very appreciative of this show and the channel in total. So definitely showing that appreciation right there. Thank you so much, David. You are covering the expenses of everybody else who is asking questions. David doesn't even have a question. So
making it rain.
Appreciate that. So let's see. What have I read in the live chat? I'm not even going to try to find the comments. I've read about how Ohio State can't find any defensive ends outside the state. And for as well as they develop defensive ends, why can't they find the best defensive ends in the country and bring them in?
I mean, what Ohio school did Chase Young come from?
Oh, but since then, they've only landed 2 out-of-staters, Tyler Friday at 18 and Jacoby Cowan in 20. I saw the question was popped up. I was doing a little research there. it's not from lack of trying. They had Nisi out of AA committed for a while, and he fell off the board or whatnot. But when you go in state and you recruit, Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton, Henry Young, Noah Potter, Tyreek Smith, and then Alex Williams was in there too, but he was only there briefly before transferring out. I mean, guys are going to look at the depth chart or whatever, and I think that maybe there's some guys that don't necessarily like the idea of rolling in 6, 7, 8 defensive ends. I mean, I don't think that there's many defensive ends out there that aren't excited for the opportunity to learn under Larry Johnson, everything he's been able to accomplish, everybody he's been able to develop, but not everybody's a great fit. And on the fit conversation, that also goes both ways. Ohio State's not necessarily going to go after every kid. We sit there and we go star hunting and we see, all right, this defensive end is, hypothetically, I don't have a Rivals 250 in front of me. He's number 7 and he's number 13. Why aren't we going after him? It's something that has to work both ways. I mean, so Ohio State isn't going to just sit there and look at star ratings and say, these are the kids we're going to go after. You have, everybody's got to check off boxes, and it doesn't always happen.
You mentioned Tunmise Adelie decommitting. Go back to Brenton Cox, Terrell Hall, where you get guys from out of state, and sometimes the lure of, I think Brenton Cox was from Georgia, correct, and stayed home in Georgia. Terrell Hall, was he Maryland or
out of the DMV area? And
he ends up at Alabama. So it's like you can secure commitments, but then you also have to keep them, and that's also difficult when there's the lure of other schools. I think they've done as well as you can, but right now they're in the midst of the JT Tuimoloau thing, and he if they land him, then that's the top 2 defensive ends. One's in state, one's out of state. I just don't think you can. I don't know why the criticism for lack of out of state defensive end recruiting when they are getting them, but you can't just. It's not shopping,
I worry more about male pattern baldness than I do about Ohio State's defensive end recruiting, to be honest. They'll be fine.
Yeah, they're going to do fine there. And obviously, if they were to land Tuimoloau, he would be on the field for them this fall. So it could create an instant impact. Although, we've seen with Joey Bosa, it took him about a half a first year, although he wasn't entirely healthy, I don't think, coming in his first year, but it took him about a half a year to become Joey Bosa. So, kind of keep a thought on that. I saw David's question about Paul Warfield, and I can just throw in my 2 cents on that. Played for Woody and was mostly a running back, I think, at Ohio State. May have been on their quasi-national championship team in 1961. And as a young Browns fan growing up in the late 70s and around 1980, I got to see his last year or two with the Cleveland Browns. He was there with Reggie Rucker and Dave Logan and Ozzie Newsome, I think, there at the very end. And Brian Sipe is the quarterback, and obviously had a great NFL career with the Miami Dolphins as well. Somebody can correct me. I presume he was on their undefeated Super Bowl championship team down there. Long NFL career as a wide receiver. So for Woody, he caught passes. Certainly they didn't throw it a whole heck of a lot, but he was a great weapon, I think, for Ohio State. And then what I think a lot of people remember him for is after his playing career was over in the early 1980s, he settled into a part-time job as a commentator. I think he did some games on NBC, but also was famous, locally famous for the WOSU replays. I think it was he and Paul Kramer, or I don't know, it wasn't Paul Kramer. Jack Kramer may have been the play-by-play guy, and Paul Warfield was the analyst. Paul Warfield was the analyst on the Ohio State football replays on Channel 34, WOSU, an NFL Hall of Famer. And I can hear his voice in my head right now, watching the games on, Saturday night at 11 o'clock or Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And because that was the only way you could watch them back then, because a lot of the games weren't on live TV. But great legacy, great Buckeye, and really one of the great names in the history of the sport, Paul Warfield.
That's right. And folks, if you're going to look up his stats online, don't expect to be amazed. Those two Super Bowl championship teams, if my computer's working, Bob Greasy went 8 for 11 and 6 for 7. They didn't throw the ball a whole lot in those games. You know, he would get his 1 or 2 big pass receptions for the day, and then he was pretty much decoyed the rest of the time.
Jim Kick and Larry Zonka and
Right.
Mercury Hayes, and I don't know. They had
Mercury
some
Morris.
guys.
You got Michigan on the brain, Steve.
Mercury Hayes. What was it? What was his name?
Mercury Morris.
Mercury Morris. Okay, not Mercury Hayes.
Freddie Mercury.
That's Mercury Hayes.
David Terrell.
The
David
Mercurial.
Terrell. I'm dyslexic when it comes to names. So.
All right. We appreciate, of course, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and Steve Hellwagon, of course, from Bucknuts on 247 Sports. Ohio State Buckeyes Live for whatever questions we didn't get to. Bring them back next week, folks. And we will talk Ohio State football. And now these guys will redirect toward the hard court. See you guys soon. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Take care.
I will redirect to lunch.
Yes.
Yeah, I gotta make a call and eat something quick. I got it too. So, yep.
We'll stop recording at some point. It's been hanging up for like ever.
I better leave before I say something I shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's just spinning. It's just spinning. But
Howard Stern, Baba Booey.
there we go.
We should be good next Wednesday. We don't have a midweek game, so
Whatever time we decide on, I'll be there.
Yeah.
all right, kids.
All right, gents.
All right,
See y'all.
See ya.
Maybe we have to leave,
See
Mark.
ya.
That's how it'll stop recording.